Welcome to Communication 101. The most common complaint that couples have when they're coming into therapy is communication issues or misunderstandings. And so what does that mean? That sounds really vague and can be difficult to understand. So part of this process is understanding the four main communication styles, identifying what communication style you dominantly speak in, understanding where that comes from and some of the hidden emotional feelings underneath it and why you might be communicating this way, and then learning how to communicate assertively and effectively so that you and your partner can actually hear one another and understand each other. Part of understanding communication is realizing that it's not just what we're saying or the words that we're choosing, but how we're saying it and our body language. So the nonverbal communication part of this is actually really important that people miss, because they may say that I'm saying these particular words, but the message that's coming across is not what they're intending, or they're not recognizing how their body language is impacting their partner to hear what they have to say. So the four main communication languages are aggressive, passive-aggressive, passive, and assertive. So let's start with aggressive. This communication style can come off very dominant, overbearing. Someone with this style may interrupt people, speak over them, raise their voice or shout, and it may feel like they're attacking the other person when they're talking to them. Sometimes they can come off like they're trying to overpower the conversation and they really want to get their message across, regardless of what the other person may think or feel. So this may not be their intention, but this is how they learn to communicate. And so some of the reasons why someone may talk this way is maybe their upbringing and their environment, right? The way we learn to communicate is based on how we needed to survive in our environment. So if you have an aggressive communication style, it may be because while you were growing up, you needed to speak louder, you needed to yell, you needed to assert yourself in a dominant way so that you would be heard and understood. This may also be how your parents or siblings talk to each other. This might be the dynamic that you had at home, was that it was overpowering and one person had to talk over the other to be heard. It also might mean that there's a lot of anger coming up for the person and they have a hard time regulating their emotional well-being and being able to express how they feel in a calm, collected manner. Passive communication is when we hold back how we actually feel and think, or we may not even really recognize what we're thinking and feeling. And so we allow the other person to make the decisions, and then we kind of go with the flow, whatever they say, to not rock the boat. So part of this is the body language can come off as weak as well. So we might be a little bit more slump our shoulders, look down, avoid eye contact. We're kind of letting things go and pass by us and not really being a participant and being engaged in the conversation, the decision making. And so this can really come from having low self-esteem, low self-worth, having a lot of self-doubt, and growing up in an environment where what we had to say didn't really matter, or we weren't allowed to express ourselves and make decisions. We were kind of put down a lot and made to question ourselves. This might be difficult in relationships, especially when the other partner is a little bit more dominant, is that a lot of the pressure goes on them to make the decisions and go forth with things, and it's not as much of a collaborative effort. They don't really know what you're thinking or feeling, and they're trusting that whatever you're saying is how you actually feel, when in reality there might be some resentment growing or you do think differently. This also comes off as people-pleasing because we want to avoid conflict and having any tension whatsoever. That can feel extremely uncomfortable and anxiety-producing. And so we prioritize reducing that anxiety and tension over how we feel and expressing what we want. Another reason why someone may be passive is because they have a difficult time setting boundaries and they're scared of how other people will respond to them or view them. And belonging and having approval of others is extremely important to them. And so because of that, they've prioritized that over how they actually feel and what they want. So they may just go along with whatever the other person says or does, even if that's not how they really feel. Passive-aggressive communication is somewhere in the middle between aggressive and passive. It's similar to passive in that we are withholding how we actually feel and not really expressing it. However, we feel angry and resentful underneath. And so that undertone comes out in other ways. So that can come off as sarcasm, rolling our eyes, giving someone the silent treatment, right? What we're saying and what we're doing is not in alignment. And that can be really confusing for our partner to understand and trust, because we might say something and then our behavior means the opposite. And so they don't really know what to rely on. Do you mean this? Do you not mean this? And then when they confront you and ask you, you go back to that passive stance of, oh, I'm totally fine with it. We'll do whatever you want. And then rolling your eyes. So it really erodes the trust and emotional safety in a relationship, because behind passive aggressiveness, there's this feeling of spitefulness, getting revenge, right? It can be kind of immature in that because we weren't allowed to express ourselves, we're going to get the other person back in a different way. And so this may have been developed growing up because we also weren't allowed to express ourselves or be heard, but we were also punished or belittled or made to feel smaller than we were. And we may have witnessed our parents kind of going through this revenge back and forth, getting someone back for doing something, and not really sharing how they feel in a very clear and direct way. So it's beating behind the bush and talking around things. The last communication style is assertive communication. This style is actually the most effective and healthiest. And so an example of this is being direct and honest, calm, doing and saying what you feel and mean so that they are congruent, focusing on what's coming up, and being considerate of not only your own emotions, but the other person's emotions, and staying calm through the process. So you're not being judgmental, you're not blaming, you're not hiding behind something or saying or doing one thing than the other. You're being very open and direct and letting the other person know how you feel, the impact it had on you, what you would like to happen differently, and problem solving with your partner at the same time. So communication is a skill, which is a positive thing. That means that we can learn how to speak effectively, and we can modify and change the way that we've been taught or ingrained to communicate with one another. So part of the exercise for this chapter is to identify your own communication language. And so it's important to remember that we may not always use this communication language across all different parts of our life or in every situation or circumstance, right? So you may have a very assertive communication style with your friends and family, but then when it comes to maybe work and your partner, you can be a little bit more passive or even passive aggressive, right? So it also depends on the setting, who you're speaking to, and the context. So when we're practicing having more assertive communication, it's going to take time and patience and a lot of effort on each partner's part, because we're going to be used to assuming that our partner is going to act the same way, or we might react the same way, not recognizing that we're trying something new and different. And even when we have a positive change or we're working towards a positive change, there's going to be resistance because it's really hard to break habits, and it's hard to rewire our brain to respond differently and look at things from a different perspective. So it's going to be important to have patience, grace with each other, and put in that effort each time to make sure that the way you're expressing how you feel is genuine, direct, and honest in a considerate, non-judgmental way. Let's go through an example of a situation and see how someone might respond through all 4 different communication styles. So let's say your partner made plans without consulting you. An aggressive way to respond to this is blaming your partner, expressing that anger and letting them know that they do this to you all the time. Their body language, the way they're speaking to you, see how I'm getting closer, your hands are getting more like fists. They're really angry and upset with you, and they're blaming you for making this decision. Right? You can feel that tension already as I'm saying it and getting closer. A passive way to respond is kind of looking down and saying, yeah, I guess that's fine. I mean, okay. A passive aggressive way to respond to this might be, I guess that's fine. It's not like I have plans or anything, but sure, we can go, right? You're saying you can go, but your body language and the way you're expressing it clearly is showing that you're upset, but you're not expressing that. It's what's not being said. An assertive way to respond to this might be, oh, actually you've done this a few times where you make plans without consulting me, and it makes me feel unappreciated. It would really be great if we can make these plans together and you consult with me first. What do you think about that? Right? It's direct. It's sharing how you feel and the impact it's had on you, and you're problem solving with your partner. You're giving a solution of how to make this better the following time. So part of being able to practice assertive communication is first understanding what are your triggers? What comes up for you when you hear something that's emotionally charging? So that means you have to practice being mindful and really checking in with yourself to see how you feel first, right? Because part of being assertive is being direct and honest. And if we don't actually know how we feel or what's coming up for us, it's going to be really hard to express this to our partner. So part of this is just going to be practicing bringing awareness to how you feel, what comes up for you when you disagree with somebody or want to do something different from them. Is there tension? Do you have knots in your stomach, right? Do you start to go into that thinking? Can you pause in that moment, take some deep breaths, right? We're going to be practicing grounding and bringing awareness to this is bringing me anxiety and stress. And so the typical way I might respond is just to agree with the person as a default. But I'm trying something new and I'm trying something different to have better communication with my partner so we can be closer to each other. So I'm going to pause and take the time to calm down, and then I'm going to actually tell them how I feel. With someone who has aggressive communication, this is going to be really important for them is to pause and practice mindfulness, bringing that self-awareness to that immediate tension or anger that comes up. It may not be representative of how we really feel, but that's our reaction right away. And so we need to take time to breathe and bring down our blood pressure, right? We're emotionally flooded in this moment. And so we want to think about what are we actually feeling and what are we upset about? And then how can I say this in a way where my partner can actually hear it and receive it and not feel attacked? Because if we have an aggressive communication style, the way we come off is going to be attacking and criticizing, and automatically it's going to put the other person on the defense. So they're not going to be able to hear what you're saying. They're not going to be able to empathize or understand where you're coming from because they need to defend themselves. And now they're also emotionally flooded and they have to work on regulating themselves. So there's a lot that happens in a very short period of time when we're communicating with somebody, and it goes all out the window if we don't take our time to slow down the process, check in to see what we're actually thinking and feeling, be able to express that in a respectful and calm way, and listen to what our partner is saying in response to that. It's hard. It's not easy. It takes a lot of effort and dedication to do this. However, if we remember the goal is to be closer to our partner, to build trust, and have that emotional safety, then it's totally worth it. There's this concept of being emotionally flooded. And so the Gottmans did a lot of research where they would measure each partner's blood pressure and heartbeat while they were having a conversation and when they were arguing. And after a certain amount, we can no longer hear each other or comprehend what the other person is saying because we are so emotionally flooded, which means our heart rate has gone up, our blood pressure has gone up, so we're no longer in a place where we can rationally hear and understand the other person. This happens a lot in arguments, right? So when you find yourself being emotionally flooded, right, whether you want to be aggressive, you're being passive aggressive, you're feeling tension in your body, that is the best time to slow down the process and work with each other, right? So it's letting the other partner know, I need a couple minutes, I feel attacked, I need you to rephrase that, or I need you to do X, Y, or Z, right? Check in with yourself and slow down and take the time. So in order to self-regulate, right, it depends on each person what they need. However, a couple tools for grounding is one very common one that you don't need anything else but yourself is taking deep breaths and counting to 4. So breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out in a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. I know this may sound silly or super easy, but that actually tells our brain and body to lower the emotional flooding, that we're safe and we can calm down. And as soon as our body feels calm and safe, then our brain lets us think and be able to respond rationally. So when we are fighting, we're not really thinking about our breathing. We're not present and we're not paying attention to anything in specific except for the argument. So one is taking these deep breaths. Another way is to kind of shock your system and redirect your focus. A lot of this is going to be redirecting your focus to calming down your body. So this could be going to the bathroom, turning on really cold water and placing your hands under it and breathing through it and noticing and thinking about the sensations on your hands, the way it feels, looks, all of that. You want to go through your senses. You don't want to spiral. You don't want to think about the argument, right? When we're self-regulating, our only focus is bringing awareness to our body and how it feels for long enough for our emotional flooding to decrease. So this might also mean going for a walk. Because we have this energy in our body, we have to release it somehow. So this could be going for a walk around the block. This could be doing 10 jumping jacks in your house, right? Just being able to release that tension. It could be going in a separate room and playing music that has a lot of emotion in it, or something happy where you can just move your body, right? We want to move this energy out of our body while we're focusing on it to a point where we feel calm and safe and where we can think rationally and come back and talk to the other person. So a tip for you to think about, am I in a space to hear my partner talk, is think about the quality of your thoughts while you're away. Are you yelling at your partner in your head? Are you angry with them? Are you thinking of all the ways they slighted you, right? This probably means that you're not ready to talk to them. If you start thinking, well, I might see where they're coming from, or I may have contributed in this way, or I'm feeling this way because of some past thing that happened to me and it's not really their fault, however it triggered me, then you can go and speak to your partner at this point. When you are open to hearing and receiving feedback from your partner, then you're in a space where you can effectively communicate. But if you're stuck in this headspace where they're wrong and they wronged you and you're angry with them and you want to tell them how angry you are and you want to show them that you're right and prove them wrong, this is not the space or the container to do that, right? It's only going to exacerbate the argument. So we want to bring our blood pressure, our heart rate down. We want to think about them and consider them in our thoughts and the quality of our thoughts and check in with ourselves. Okay, it's going to take time, it's going to take practice, but totally worth it, right? It does not mean that we're not going to have arguments or disagreements. It means that when we do have them, we are respectful, we're direct, we're honest, we're focusing on both of our emotions, not just our own, and we're open to problem solving.